I have 2 young girls. My almost 3-year-old is becoming increasingly rebellious. I understand we're all born sinners, but yet it's hard for me to see her as having an evil heart. How do I help to transform her behavior without her having a true understanding of Christ and his sacrifice? I want to be firm but not harsh. That's a good line. You want to take that one, babe? I'm tired. You're helpful. This is where I just share the workload, baby. Okay, so.
Well, I like to start, especially if I'm frustrated in a moment, I like to start with praying either over my child or praying in my head for the moment, Lord, give me wisdom, give me peace, give me self-control in this moment. I didn't really have a hard time seeing my kids as sinners in their bad moments.
I just, I married truth and justice girl. Oh yeah, they're going to hell. Yes, they are. Okay, I know.
So it was urgent for me to get that sit out. But I think, really understanding, like Mark said, there can be physical things in a moment where they're tired or they're hungry. Trying to understand in a moment what is really going on and not just looking at the action and declaring what you're going to do with it, which I tended to do sometimes, and I'm sorry for that, boys. So I think really stopping and saying, okay, are you hungry? Are you tired? Why are you screaming? Why are you acting out right now? Trying to get to the why of the question.
Real quick too, babe, not to, but some parents over-spiritualize everything. They're like, oh yeah, the devil's coming after my kid. No, they have not had a nap. And so they're temporarily insane. That's what they are. It's a physical problem. They're teething. When they're little sometimes, you think this child is just possessed, and then they fart. And then you realize, oh, they just had gas, right? But how many of you have seen that with a child? You're like, I don't know what's wrong. And they're like, and then the child just smiles. And you're like, oh, this was a very simple fix. And it really had nothing to do with casting out the demon. It was an air bubble is what it was that needed to pass. And so sometimes it's a very physical, right? I mean, I'm just telling the truth, right? Some of you adults are like that. And so what happens is sometimes it's a very physical problem, sometimes it's spiritual. But and some parents will blame everything on they're tired. Oh, it's the terrible 2s, it's the awful 3s, it's the crazy 27s. We just sort of make excuses for the whole life of the child. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's spiritual, sometimes it's both. But like Grace is saying, you can't overlook the physical. Sometimes that's important as well. And this is all a spiritual question, but part of it may be physical. Sorry, go ahead. And I just want to tell that funny story. So go ahead. Yeah. So what if they're not sure if their child knows Christ? Where do they start with a 3-year-old girl who's got...
So, like you talked about, there needs to be authority established within this age. So making sure, for me, I had to distinguish between my rules and God's rules. Sometimes, especially if they're acting out in public, it can be easy to reprimand them because you're embarrassed or you don't want people to think certain things of you. You can respond wrongly and sinfully against your child. And so making sure that actually they're sinning, and sometimes we need to remove them from a public situation. It's not always convenient to do that, but as parents, we are constantly inconvenienced, and it's okay. It's part of raising our kids. So basically figuring out, okay, is this a sin? I need to establish some authority and establish God's authority over this. God doesn't allow this. He doesn't want us to be acting this way. This is a sin. How do we get through this? Do you need to apologize for it? How do we stop this action? So when they're really little, you can't have these long conversations. You lose them. But in a simple way, it's not okay to be screaming right now. We're not going to be able to work this through until you stop screaming. So when you can stop screaming, we'll talk about this. Or mommy will respond to you. Or, and maybe sometimes it's time out in their room or disciplining in ways that God asks us to. But basically, if you overreact in a moment, you're not helping them understand Christ. And so we have to really practice self-control in those moments and help them understand, okay, you do have control over this, and I'm going to help you understand what that looks like, because Jesus helps me understand how to have self-control over my actions. So it's kind of that ongoing story over and over and over as you discipline your kids, and it starts out very simple and very short and sweet with the little kids, and then it gets more and more as they become older. And with our kids, as they were getting close to accepting Christ, they did ramp up on the sin. It was interesting to kind of watch. They got really, really bad for a while, and there was almost that spiritual wrestling that they wouldn't have been able to describe, but that was all the more when we'd read more Bible stories. We'd try and explain those stories to them and show examples in the Bible of good behavior and Christ's love for them and what he wants good for them.
And part of it, I'd say too, it's that we talked about last week, the law of sowing and reaping. It's reading the Bible, praying with, praying over, taking to church, worshiping with the child, sowing and reaping. Sometimes you don't see the harvest till a ways down the road. But the other thing I just feel inclined to share is when the child is rebelling, that's when you draw near them. Okay, you mentioned the word here, rebellious. Sometimes when the child is rebelling, we're like, I'm done, I'm walking away, I need a break, and sometimes we're frustrated, we need to calm down. But in those moments, as much as we're able, stopping and praying, okay, God, when I was rebelling, you drew near to me. Okay? You pursued me. Romans says that it's the kindness of God that leads to repentance. That means we're rebellious and we haven't turned toward the Lord. The Lord has turned toward us and he comes toward us with a smile on his face and love in his heart and forgiveness already offered freely. And sometimes what the child is doing, they're testing. Am I safe? Am I loved? Will you pursue me or will you reject me? And so when they're rebelling, it's an opportunity to really extend love and grace. And so when my kids were rebelling, I would actually walk toward them, not in a domineering or intimidating way. I would smile, I put my hand, I say, I love you, I'm your dad, I'm coming for my hug, I'm gonna love you. And sometimes they would, no, you're not gonna hug. Oh yes, I am gonna hug you, I'm gonna love you. I don't want to. I know you're very sinful right now, so I'm gonna kiss you too. And I would kind of turn it into a thing. And by the end, they're like, this is ridiculous. He just hugs and kisses me. Because that's how I believe God treats me. God pursues me, he smiles at me, he loves me, he's got a father's heart, he gives me a hug, he kisses me until I stop freaking out. I'm like, sorry, Dad. He's like, I know, son. That's why I'm here. Okay, so rebellion is an opportunity for the child's heart to be exposed. It's also an opportunity for you to expose the heart of God to the rebellious heart of the child.